How's it going, everybody? My name's Dave Whipple and you're watching Bush Radical. Today it's about 85 degrees here in Michigan, sweltering hot. Kind of a long, boring, miserable, humid day. But I think it's a fantastic day to sit out here in the woods, in the shade, and do a little restoration on a vintage pocket knife. Now this is the candidate. I picked this knife up the other day at a flea market in Trufen. And although this is an economic construction style, it's got steel liners as opposed to brass, it's a good quality knife, even if it was one of the more affordable models back when it was new. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna pull up a stump. We're gonna give this thing a good little quick restoration. And by restoration, I mean we're gonna make it work so it opens without breaking your thumbnail. And it's gonna be nice and sharp and cleaned up and ready to use. First things first, need a good comfortable place to sit. Need a good usable stump. Here's the products we're gonna use. We've got ourselves some PB Blaster. We've got ourselves some Brake Clean, some good old WD-40, roll of shop towels, some 2000 grit wet dry sandpaper. I've got a piece of very, very well used 220, and last but not least, a good Norton India Stone. There's our knife. Oh my goodness, it's almost impossible to work the small blade until it's about halfway out. And the big blade feels like it's got sandpaper in it already. First thing we should do with this knife, let's get her sprayed down good. Oh, immediately, such an improvement. There's probably even, there's already a snap on the big blade. Just a little bit of lubrication. How about this guy? Oh, this guy's much more not happy. Man, this little blade is not a happy camper. You can also see how it's making kind of a rusty soup at the joint. Give it a little more. Okay, that's a very good sign. Just with a little bit of penetrating oil, both of these blades are usable. This one doesn't have much for a snap. It's got a little bit. It'll snap that last little bit. Now the bigger blade, on the other hand, it has quite a bit more of a snap to it. I could hardly open either one of these with my thumbnail just a minute ago. Very good sign. I think what I'll do at this point is grab a chunk of this 2000 grit paper. I'm just going to load this blade up with PB Blaster. You can see on this first side, it's starting to clean up pretty decent. The sandpaper is exceptionally fine, but it's also not really going to screw up my blade at all. Don't forget to get your fingernail in there and clean out that fingernail groove. Now that's already cleaned up pretty good. If you consider this is the blade kind of after a couple minutes of scrubbing, and this is what it looked like before, I think it's doing just what I want it to. Do the same thing on the other side. Oh yeah, that's cleaning up nice. I was kind of afraid that this 2000 grit might be a little bit light, but I think it's doing just what I want. Now what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to clean right up here by the bolster and see if we can figure out what company made this knife. I think this knife is an Imperial. It just looks like other Imperials I've seen, but I don't know. Well, there was a couple views of the maker's mark, and this is actually a Hammer brand knife. I'm going to go ahead and try to clean up these bolsters, and I'm going to try to clean up the back, and I'm going to try to clean up the inside of these liners. Well, let's start off with the inside of the knife. It is quite grubby, and being the fact that the liners aren't brass, they're actually rusted up. That's doing the job. Turning the inside of the knife into a soupy, rusty mess. But it's getting it clean. Now for the other side here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my stump and I'm going to try to keep the knife right about here. You know, I just want to get that very end. And already you can see just this puddle of rust that's coming off that end cap. And it's starting to clean up. Hey, you know what? That's not bad. That's better than I thought it would be. So there's a cap that hasn't been done. And there's the other cap that's most of the way done. Let's do the other three and see what it looks like. Here's a before. And there's the after. Here's a before. And there's the after. I was quite surprised how well these bolsters cleaned up. Now I need to take care of the small blade. We'll go ahead and clean this blade up. And then I'll just have to keep working the joint, because the joint on this one is really quite sticky. You can see already everything that's come off this blade is on that paper. It's quite a mess. A little bit of oil, a whole lot of patience. Now this small blade just needs a little bit more work than the big one did. Getting that last little nook right there is kind of a chore. At the same time, I'll clean up the top of this blade. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take this small blade and I'm going to take this chunk of twig. Wow, that's so dull it ain't even funny. See what I'm going to do? I'm just going to put a little bit of a spear tip on this chunk of twig. Then I'm going to take this piece of paper and I'm going to cut a strip. About like so. Then I'm going to wrap my paper around my twig, so I can use it kind of more as a little tool. So I can really start to work that rust off that last little section, that area that's almost impossible to get to. Nice. Now we can really get a good look at that stamp. There's actually a second row of numbers in there, but it's pretty much impossible to see. It never comes out to where it's in the open. But you can definitely read the top patent number for sure. These springs are quite rusty and they could be a lot better than they are. So just like before, I'm going to hit that with a bit of oil. Back to my 2000 grit. I like that soupy mess the oil makes. The soupier the better it seems to work. I think I'm going to go back to my little sanding stick here to get into these tight spaces. Yeah. Even though this PB blaster works really good, I don't really love the smell of it. It's definitely going to be nice when all the cleaning is done and I can spray this sucker out with some brake clean and just get rid of all this PB blaster smell on everything. I think I'll actually try a little bit of this heavier paper, just see if I can clean out this back a bit more. Oh yeah, that's working good. You know, the beautiful thing about restoring pocket knives is you can get a good quality knife generally for next to nothing. You can see that's doing the job. I think those folks back then that made these knives, worked in the factories, I think they would appreciate that folks nowadays see the value in good quality antique knife like this and give it a little bit of time, a little bit of attention, and put it back into service. I think they'd like that. Oh, it's got some junk in it for sure. All right. That's a lot of grossness right there. Now we'll give this little knife a good sharpening. I generally like to sharpen with the stone in a vise. I find I do a really good job that way. But, you know, the vise is in the garage. Well, there's a nice after photo of our knife project. Let's take a look at this side. That's a nice little knife. Scales are still in good shape. Blades are still in good shape. Now that they've been cleaned out, you know, there's a little snap to this small one. That's not too bad. And this big one, it's got a pretty good snap. Well, considering the quality of this knife and considering the intended use that I have for it, I think we're to the point right now where we're pretty much wrapped up. Both blades are sharp enough to shave the hair off your arm. The big blade does have a small chip up towards the tip, but you know what? It's an old knife. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me during this vintage pocket knife restoration. My name's Dave Whipple and you've been watching Bush Radical. Be radical, eh? See you soon.